The best way that I can describe it is that it felt like Kristopher Triana had me by the back of the neck and was shoving my face into this world that he's created, and I to the point that you almost feel like you're drowning in it, and then right before you do, he like lifts you up to take a breath, and then he just smushes you back into it. Well, today I am very excited to bring you another author focus video. I would like to talk about extreme horror author Kristopher Triana. I just recently did some videos about the Splatterpunk Awards, and that was the first time that I had ever read Kristopher Triana. I had read a collaboration that he did, The Night Stalkers, which is with Ryan Harding. I read Full Brutal, and I also read The Old Lady. I did read 6 new stories for this video. I figured that since I reviewed those so recently, it would be more fun for me to explore more new material from him for this video. If you do want to hear my review about any of those stories, I will include the links in the description. Really quick before we get into it, I am getting over a cold. I think I sound normal, but if I don't, that is why. Also, if you could please not say anything about my red nose, that would be amazing. Despite not feeling 100%, I am very excited for today's video. I have so much to talk about. Now, with these author focus videos, where I read a bunch of books from the same author, my intention and purpose with that is always to try to discover what it is about them that is unique, or where do they kind of shine, all that jazz. When I covered Full Brutal and The Old Lady, it just so happened that I listened to both of those. While I did still appreciate the story, I don't think that I fully appreciated Kristopher Triana until I physically read one of his books. I physically read all of the books for this video, either a physical copy of the book or at least on the Kindle app on my phone. Don't talk about my nose. So what is it about Kristopher Triana, who is a pretty well-known author in this genre? What is it that makes him special as an author? Hopefully this is obvious, but I would just really like to drive home the point. Praise for one author is not criticism directed at any other author. So this is just meant to be a compliment for Mr. Triana, not an insult to any other author in this genre. Obviously, I like this genre. I read it all the time. So just to be adamant about that point. What stands out about Mr. Triana? Honestly, it's just the quality of the writing. What became abundantly clear to me is that Kristopher Triana is a very talented writer who chooses to write in this genre. He does not need gore or smut to keep the reader's attention. When he does choose to include all those horror elements that we enjoy, it's to serve the purpose of the story. It's never like, oh no, people are getting bored, throw something spicy in there or whatever. Like he doesn't need it. I'm a big fan of audiobooks, and I've enjoyed so many of the performances from different narrators. But I think the thing about it is that you're much less likely to pause a story to kind of mull over a line you just heard than you are if you physically read it, to just sort of stop for a second and to really take it in, or maybe analyze it a little bit further. It took me so much longer to read this first book I'm going to talk about in particular than it normally would, because I kept stopping to analyze the writing. This first book is the most fun that I've had reading a book and picking apart the writing in a very long time. So let's just go ahead and start getting into the reviews. Even if you haven't read this, I'm sure you've heard of it. I would imagine this is his most well-known book, and that is Gone to See the Riverman. Our main character in Gone to See the Riverman is a woman named Lori. Lori is one of those ladies who has been writing letters to a serial killer in prison named Edmund Cox. She's trying to tell herself this whole time that it's not weird. She's not like this pathetic lady who's desperately trying to get some excitement in her life by writing a serial killer. It's not like that. she's just really interested in true crime, and she is not becoming increasingly delusional that this man who clearly has violent tendencies towards ladies would make an exception for her because of, like how special she is. When he was arrested, the police never found this cabin of his, and so he gives her this directive that she's supposed to go to his cabin, and in his cabin there will be a key, and she should bring that key to the Riverman, who will just be a dude that is down the river from the cabin. She does not ask as many questions as one should or one typically would, but it's not because she's trying to impress him or anything, like she's just curious and wants to get more information out of him. And it's not because she's just this sad lady who's desperate for approval from this terrible, terrible man, right? Like it couldn't possibly be that. She's okay. Don't talk about my nose. That is our basic premise. Is the Riverman a dude, just like a regular dude who's just called the Riverman? Is he some sort of supernatural entity? Is he even real? Is he just a myth? That's what we're kind of not sure about. A lot of questions. But she's like, I'm going. And you find out that Lori has a sister and Abby needs a caregiver, and Lori is her caregiver. And so Lori doesn't want to bring Abby along. She kind of wants to go on this adventure to the serial killer's cabin on her own. But because she's her caregiver and it's not easy to get proper care for Abby because Abby can be a bit of a handful, she just decides to take her with. Strangely enough, this mission given to her by a serial killer turns out to be less than wholesome, and it gets wild. And the thing is that it's not even the journey itself. I mean, it is, but not just. Because as she's going on this journey to see the Riverman that increasingly gets more and more wild and chaotic, we are also finding out information about Lori. And Lori isn't all she seems to be in the beginning. The writing in this book is fantastic. In my personal opinion, the writing always shines. But you get this man, or he puts himself, I suppose, in a nature setting, and he doesn't just shine, he becomes radioactive. He probably glows in the dark, honestly. He's just constantly using the natural elements and the weather in order to build and ease tension in the story. As the reader, he is playing your emotions like a fiddle, and with the use of the natural environment, it's so effective, and it's just at times it's just beautiful. You have this woman who's going on this journey to this cabin, and even though there is this desire from her, like, let's just be real, to please him, right? Like, he's sending her, nobody else, he's sending her on this mission to this cabin. She wants him to approve of her. She wants him to like her. She wants to be special. But there's still a sense of trepidation. As you would expect, she's going into the woods. She's going to an unknown place. She's going to meet an unknown person, entity, thing. She's not really sure. So obviously, it's not like she's going in without any worry or concern. She's just, despite that, she's very determined to try to gain Edmund's approval. You get an indication of how she's feeling by how he's describing the natural elements around her. So not only is she feeling that way, but he's kind of allowing you to put yourself in this environment and to kind of mimic the way she would be feeling. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here of some of the lines from this book that I stopped to analyze a million times. When Lori and her sister Abby are still in the car and they are on their way to the woods. So we haven't even really started our journey yet. So we are kind of peak anxiety in regards to the unknown. We're on page 12 here. Sweet birch and sugar maples lined the state road, their wet branches hanging overhead, creating a spotty, russet tunnel of foliage, the branches clawing the sky. using the word clawing, describing the branches not as extending into the sky, but the specific use of the word clawing elicits a certain kind of an emotion. His very seemingly intentional use of very specific adjectives that will inspire certain types of melancholy or anxiety or whatever emotion he's playing maestro over in that moment. So we've established that this road that they're driving down, surrounded by trees, it's kind of a slightly eerie feeling, the branches clawing the sky, right? Almost like they're trying to either pull the sky down or pull themselves up, trying to escape. And then the next page, these women in this car, winding around a sharp corner, the trees opened like a starving mouth, revealing their first glimpse of the hollow river. Okay, let's pick apart this sentence. Think about this imagery. These women are driving towards a destiny of sorts. They're winding a sharp corner, so they cannot see exactly what is on the horizon until they turn this corner, right? And when they do, the trees opened like a starving mouth, revealing their first glimpse of the river. So these women can see their destiny. There's all sorts of red flags here, okay? The vibes are off. She is willingly choosing to drive into a starving mouth that is going to consume her. There's a lot of imagery and symbolism here. It has this very ominous feeling to it. Alarm bells going off in your head like danger, danger, but you're making the decision to ignore your gut. And just the way that he uses the description of the nature in order to drive home the emotions that she would be feeling. For me, it's so effective, the way that he describes things. And even like I was saying, the weather, this was something I noticed in The Old Lady, which is another story that takes place largely in the woods. He uses weather to help build a sense of impending doom, right? There will be a storm approaching, or there is a cold front on the horizon, or is the rain crashing down, or is it lightly drizzling? Like, he uses these sorts of weather things to either give you a sense of impending doom or to just sort of give you a sense of slight unease. It gives you the sense of impending doom due to these natural elements, but that also it aids in the building of the drama and the storyline. You know, those things are working in conjunction to build the intensity or to pull back on it. There's times where he uses phrasing that is actually rather kind of playful. The rain seemed to be enjoying itself. Compared to something like bloated clouds were on the verge of going black, churning overhead like a witch's cauldron, a groan of distant thunder rolling deep within them, building that impending sense of doom, building tension, turbulence on the horizon. Okay, so I have another, which to me is just a perfect example of how effective the writing is in this story, and his just incredible, seemingly, again, I don't know this man. I can't say as to what inarguably his motives or intentions were. Obviously, I can just say how it comes across to me. But there's a point when Lori and Abby are no longer in their car. They are on foot in the woods trying to find this cabin, right? They come across this shack, which is not the shack. It's just a different dude's shack. So you imagine we have two women in the woods. They're meeting a man who lives in the shack. There's already a bit of tension. This is a stranger that they don't know. So obviously this could be a very anxiety-inducing experience. They really are in a position where they could use some help. It's raining and whatnot, to be able to stay or take a break in his shack. How is Mr. Triana describing things at this point? So he is describing the outside of this shack. He is using words to describe things like dilapidated, deteriorated, rusted, broken, moldy. If there was a yard, it was smothered by fallen leaves. It's strong, negative connotations. Now, despite this, they do decide to take advantage of this man's generosity to come into his shack to take a break on their journey. When they get into the house, how is Mr. Triana describing things? Because it's not like the outside is a hot mess and the inside is strikingly pristine for some reason. It's not. But now he is using words like stained, worn, lined with dust. And so they're words that mean similar things, but he's softening the language quite a lot, which allows us as the reader to pick up on the fact that Lori and Abby feel more comfortable inside the cabin than they did outside the cabin. The softer language makes it seem less intimidating or less off-putting, less scary. And so he's not saying, oh, they felt more comfortable in here. He's showing you, not telling you. I found his descriptions like this so beautifully executed in this book in particular, but not only this book. On their journey, eventually trying to make their way to the Riverman, and the way that he turns this journey into just this surreal nightmare. Oh, also, I suppose for this book in particular, I do have to put our warning up. There's a dog. So I've spent a lot of time. I have 5 other books I have to get to. So I am going to move on. But when he gets later on in the story and we're getting to the point of approaching the Riverman and how we as the reader think about the Riverman. It kind of starts off with, is it a person? Is he even real? And by the end, the concepts that he's using, not specifically to describe the Riverman, but he's planting these ideas in your head. He references the pull of gravity from different planets, the cosmos, galaxies, just concepts that are bigger than Earth. So it kind of lends itself to you unconsciously. You start to think about concepts that are bigger than our earthly plane. And he's kind of subconsciously planting that in your head. He doesn't have to say, the Riverman is supernatural and he's bigger than you or me and he's some big grand thing. He's planting the idea so it allows you as the reader to come to your own conclusions. The ending of this book was exactly what I was hoping it would be. Evil is inherently selfish. And when you surround yourself with evil in order to embrace that yourself, but also feel less alone, the inevitable result of that is that you will be on the receiving end of the selfishness of others. I see why it is so beloved in the genre. Now, I have so many other books I have to talk about. Shit. Now, Gone to See the Riverman does have a sequel, Along the River of Flesh. The thing is I cannot really talk about a big part of this book without a pretty major spoiler from the first book. Should I? Oh, I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to say it right now. And if you don't want to know, just skip ahead. Okay. Along the River of Flesh is about Edmund Cox, who is no longer in prison for reasons, and he is going back to his cabin and then going to go see the Riverman. So we are no longer following Lori. Now, following Edmund is also a detective and a PI and this other younger woman by the name of June. There's a detective who is looking for Edmund. He doesn't know where the cabin is, but he has reason to believe that Edmund would be in these woods along this river and all of that. There is a PI who is searching in this area, having been hired on by a family of a woman who is missing. He's just looking for evidence of what happened to this woman. June is specifically looking for Edmund Cox. Now you kind of get the impression that she is also one of those true crime junkies who's just really excited and intrigued about the possibility of meeting him. Something that I personally like to do when I am reading books. If I have a decent chunk of time to do some reading. I do enjoy turning on some background, either like those soundscapes, you know, where there's like a crackling fire or something, or I like to turn on some music that is somehow kind of connected to what I'm reading, or at least matching the vibes, you know? So with Gone to See the Riverman, I just had on the sound of rain in the woods. It was just background noise, right? But it did add to the experience for me. I thought I was going to do the same thing with Along the River of Flesh, because I figured they're going to be in the woods again, surely, right? But in this book, Kristopher Triana was talking about this sort of southern blues music called Delta Blues. So I just sort of was like, okay, what the hell? And I turned on videos of Delta Blues music to have on in the background. And let me tell you, it gave a very different energy to the reading experience I had compared to the first book. Not everybody wants to multitask in that way, but personally, don't talk about my nose, I really do enjoy doing that. It really does kind of add to the experience for me reading. So if you're into that, I would recommend. This is very similar to the first book in the sense that you have these people who are going along the river with the intention. Not all of them start off with the intention of meeting the Riverman specifically, but, you know, ultimately that is where this is going, and we all knew it would be. And similar to the first story where you kind of uncover some information about Laurie, you are uncovering information about these characters. It's also the fact that the closer that they get to their goal, the more of kind of their true character starts to show in their behavior, and kind of the ugliest parts of them kind of rise to the surface. This guy Keith, who's the detective, who has a very abrasive, unpleasant personality from the start. The PI, Gary, is much more likable, chill, sort of seeming. And then June, who she's a teenage runaway. June comes across as being somewhat petulant, you know, just a little bit immature as a teenager, like she's got a chip on her shoulder, you know. Now, something that he does in this story to help aid in that build of tension in the story is that instead of there being an impending storm, he has the cold. It's a different time of year than the last story took place. It's cold outside. It's at that transition point where the weather is getting colder and colder. And so as you are progressing through the story and they're getting closer and closer to seeing the Riverman, the cold of the weather continues to seep into the ground and into their surroundings. And so it gets colder and colder the further along their journey it gets. The sense of dread in both of these books, it's just beautifully orchestrated, and you really do feel that as you're reading it. Like you don't know exactly how it's gonna go, but you just know that this isn't leading anywhere good. I liked this story. Is it as good as the first one? To be honest, I would say no. Not because of a flawed concept or execution of the book per se. I just think that it is the inherent struggle of the fact that we, as the reader, already know what this journey looks like manifested physically. He does describe things in a way that is not contradictory to the first book, but he doesn't just regurgitate the same exact information. He does try to give you a new experience. But it is something where obviously it's not surprising because we already kind of know what to expect as the final destination to a certain degree. I also just think for me personally that the focus on Laurie's character and the surprises that that are uncovered led me to believe that there would be similar surprises in the second book. So you have more anticipation of these characters being sketchy. I don't really know how he could have avoided those things. Sometimes I'm not sure if something is meant to be a twist per se, or if it's just what happened. I was not surprised by the ending. I don't know if I was supposed to be, but it was something that crossed my mind earlier, fairly early into the book. That being said, though, it's a very good book. Kristopher Triana is one of those authors who is going to suffer from his own talent, and he is going to be held to a higher standard than a lot of other people would, because it's you know how good it can be. The first book had overall more impact for me personally. I have to put a little giddy up in my step because I have 4 more books to get through. Let's switch it up a bit. Let's talk about Because You're Mine. And this was written in 2024. Gone to See the Riverman was 2020. Along the River of Flesh was 2023. First thing I noticed is the cover, which I loved. I think it's really simple and very pretty, and I like it. A very different energy to the other books. This is sort of like a horror-themed love story in a way. So we have our 2 main characters. We have a woman named Shelby who works as a nurse in a hospital. She has a burning hatred for the elderly. She's not exactly an angel of mercy, so to speak, because typically that's trying to end the suffering of people who are, towards the end stages or whatever of life. This is more just she has the opportunity to give people the wrong medication or too much medication, or she just has the opportunity to get rid of these old people, and she is established she don't like them, so she does that. There's no guilt or shame in it for her. It's just a hobby and she enjoys doing it. Now we also have this guy who Brian. Now Brian is a man who is also lacking compassion. His mother is old and unwell, and they are rich for reasons. He has become her caregiver in their home, but he is very resentful of this. He doesn't want to be her caregiver. He just wants to live in this mansion and play his organ, which he does play one. And was I listening to organ music while I read this? Yes, I was. He hates his mother, but he cannot bring himself to offer or anything like that. But he does end up hiring Shelby to be her nurse at her home. And so you have this nurse who hates old people and lacks compassion, and you have this man who hates his mother and lacks compassion, and you can kind of imagine where the story goes from there. Now, fun fact, I used to be a nursing assistant. I never worked in a hospital. I just worked in a couple different nursing homes. So this was a bit of a trip down memory lane for me. Kind of brought up some feelings of nostalgia. Not the drugging people part. I didn't. Just the settings. Some of the settings brought me back a little bit. Some of the challenges of dealing with certain types of patients, things of that nature. Being a caregiver to anybody who, whether they're elderly or not, if they are in need of a caregiver, there is often going to be a lot of challenges, a lot of self-control needed. And it reminded me of something that I was taught by my teacher when I was getting my certificate to be a nursing assistant. She said, in order to be good at your job, you have to be obnoxiously kind and obnoxiously patient. And that always stuck with me because it really is true. It's the hardest thing in the world. Sometimes it is very hard for somebody who has normal feelings of empathy and compassion. It's still challenging. It really does push you to your limits. So then you take into account that this is somebody who doesn't feel compassion. And it's something where his mother starts to go through a bit of a rough time, as I'm sure you can imagine. And the way Kristopher Triana wrote the mom in this is that she is annoying. She's annoying, and so you don't really feel as bad for her as you would if she was just like a super sweet old lady. It makes it easier to read. It's a dark premise. There is dark things. There are secrets revealed. I'm gonna sneeze. You won't stop me, cold. I'm gonna talk about Kristopher Triana. You're not gonna stop me. Oh no, it's not coming out. Oh, that's the worst. Oh, that's way worse than just sneezing. Oh, no. But I do think that there are layers to this beyond that, because if you take out the horror elements of this and just kind of look at the relationship forming between Brian and Shelby, there's commentary in here regarding that struggle with loneliness when you, not from a lack of options, but just a lack of people who really see you, and feeling like you can never have love or have real affection because it's not safe for anybody to know or see the real you. To me, again, I can't speak to his motives, but to me, there is commentary in here regarding that sort of feeling. When you have that sort of premise of two people who have a deep, dark secret, maybe there can be an exception, or I actually do view you as above my disdain for the general population. Because even if you do hate people, human beings are social creatures, and it is very hard to not feel a sense of loneliness if you don't have anybody. And especially if you have those feelings of, there's people in my life, but none of them really know me. There's a deep loneliness with feeling like your existence and your truth of who you are isn't being, not just not being appreciated, but not even being witnessed in any way. Like it's literally just your secret that will die with you. No one will ever see who you actually were, and then to be proven wrong. And it's kind of a love story. Beatrice, the mother, why is she the way that she is? My nose. Don't talk about my nose. Where did this come from? I do have to say though, the entire book, Shelby is being stated to be a nurse. And then there is just like a random part, the beginning of chapter 16, where she is referred to as a CNA, which would be a certified nursing assistant, which is definitely not a nurse. Or if there is just some secret alternate meaning to CNA that I'm not aware of, but as far as I can tell, it's just an oopsie. I liked that story. I think that part of, I liked it in particular, I think because of my personal experience in the medical field, that I got a little bit out of some of the commentary on caregiving and whatnot. We're going to switch up the tone a bit with Toxic Love. This story is considerably, in my opinion, less mushy than the last one. Okay, so this was written in 2019, or published. Now, Toxic Love. Oh no, okay. This is about a man named Mike who works as a crime scene cleaner-upper. So Mike's 45 years old. He's divorced from his wife. He has some children, and he's feeling kind of down on his luck. Between the divorce, not having the easy access to his children anymore, trying to start over at this age. Obviously, the job is a pretty not glamorous, let's say. He's just kind of taking it day by day, but he's going through a hard time. He's on the job for a while and he's doing well. And then he meets this new woman named Carmen. And Carmen is beautiful. She's beautiful. However, as is often the case, she is also mentally So Carmen doesn't need this job. Carmen wants this job because she is aroused sexually by the blood and the crime scenes and all the things that would be in a crime scene. And so here's friggin' Mike, and she's like, hey, you're here. Like, all this stuff that's turning me on is here, and you're here. I'm a woman. You're a man. We should get down to business. And Mike, being a 45-year-old man who's not really feeling great about himself, and he's like, I have the opportunity to have sex with this really gorgeous young woman. I should do that. And so he does do that. So that becomes kind of a routine for them. As soon as the police leave and they're alone, they get freaky in the crime scene, have to clean up the crime scene anyway, so they're able to conceal the evidence of their rendezvous. Eventually, the story leads to a point where she's needing to up the ante. Like, her interest in Mike is not that she's necessarily that attracted to him, but obviously, even if she's a sexy young lady, not every guy is going to be willing to to do what she's wanting to do where she's wanting to do it. So she's kind of pursues Mike more than one would think. Any that she would under any other circumstances. Oh, Mike. She just sort of leads him around by his dick into increasingly dangerous and unstable situations. And poor Mike, is seemingly in over his head. But also, is he? I guess that's kind of the ultimate question is who does he, this is just sort of about that escalation and if Mike will continue to be in over his head, or will he rise to the occasion, so to speak. This book, as expected, is by far, out of all the ones I read, the most smut heavy. If you are about that life and you want to try, this would be the one to do it with. Now, I don't mind it. I'm not upset about it. That being said, out of the books that I read from him, this one was probably my least favorite. Not because of the smut per se, as I said, I don't mind it, but just because I feel like because of the nature of what the story was, there was just less opportunity for my favorite parts of his writing. Comparatively, that's very important because it's a good book. The writing is solid. Comparatively to his other works, there's less layers. There's less commentary going on. But obviously, toxic love. There is a comparison there to be made to just generally toxic relationships. Somebody else's behavior and your reliance upon them or your desperation not to be alone is causing you to spiral. The relationship just isn't good for you. Oh, no, wait, I said the wrong name before. Oh, I suck. Carmen's one of the daughters. Sorry. I'm sorry. I remember those plot lines. I don't remember names very well. Carmen is one of the daughters. There's two daughters, Faye and Carmen. The woman that he's getting freaky with is Sage. Not Carmen. I do think, though, that it's kind of, I understand it, but it's still kind of annoying to read, is basically how he is just engaging in this over-the-top insane sex life, and the entire time he keeps kind of thinking about his ex-wife and the divorce and how he wanted them to reunite, but every single time he talks about wanting his family to be back together, he's talking about his kids. When he thinks about his wife, he thinks about their relationship falling apart, but he never, in this entire thing, every time he talks about wanting to get back together with his ex-wife, it's always because of the kids. Just like such a thing where you're getting this freaky sex and you're thinking about getting back together with a woman that you have expressed no desire for her as a person, just to have your desire is simply to have the family unit together for the sake of the kids, but you don't seem to actually, there's no evidence of actually loving or missing your wife. And so you have this dual perspective of this man who's enjoying the high life, getting all this sex with this young woman, but then also has this other side to him of the wife and the kids, and how part of him misses what he had. Sort of. I'm not mad that it's written that way. It's just one of those things it's realistic, but that doesn't mean it's not frustrating to read. And also, I suppose, the ability to recognize that even though this tryst with this young woman is exciting and it makes him feel, vibrant and liberated and all of that, it's ultimately not very good for him. And that while his marriage with his wife may have seemed boring in comparison, that it was healthier and better for him overall. I do think that there are some layers to it in regards to that, but it's mostly smut. The other one that I read that takes place in the woods is called A Cold Place for Dying, and this was written in 2022. This is about a man named Joe. He's going on a hunting trip by himself to a place called Black Mountain on Christmas Eve. At the beginning of this story, we have this man, he's just sitting alone in his car, contemplating these plans that he has for this trip and what he's hoping that this opportunity for solitude will bring him. He's hoping that this experience being out hunting alone in the woods will make him feel more in tune with his masculinity and just kind of to his true core self. He is looking forward to this trip. But much like in our other nature locale stories, there is a snowstorm on the horizon. So we know that there's chaos. Bad stuff is a-coming. There is this sense of hopefulness, but there is also this sense of potential danger. He goes to the woods. And when he is there, all of a sudden, there is this woman who is, again, it's cold outside. There's a snowstorm coming. She's running around barefoot. And her name, Nicole. She basically tells him that she was kidnapped and she is running away from her pursuer. He, of course, is like, oh my gosh, like I need to help this woman. I need to try to get her off of this mountain. But then you start to hear this other man calling out for a Katie, and Nicole just like runs away. And our guy here, Joe, he's confused. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just here, right? And so this man comes up to Joe and he's like, have you seen this woman? And he doesn't know for sure, like, what's going on. So he pretends like he hasn't seen her. And then the guy's telling him, my wife is mentally unwell and she ran out of the house and I'm trying to find her before she freezes to death. I'm worried about her, all of this stuff. And so now Joe isn't sure who to believe. Is this Katie? The man's calling her Katie. Is Katie a mentally unwell woman who thinks that she's running from her captor when really she's just confused? Or is this man a big fat liar because obviously he's not going to ask this man, hey, have you seen the woman I was chasing? Joe, not knowing who to believe and trying to kind of play this balancing act of wanting everybody to be safe from this impending storm, but he's kind of playing the almost like a negotiator between these two people who are giving completely opposite stories and getting angry that he's not taking their side, and he has nothing to do with any of this. But he feels a sense of responsibility because if she is telling the truth, then he doesn't want to abandon this woman to be re-kidnapped. And if he's telling the truth, then he doesn't want to just steal this woman from, you know what I mean? Like he's completely torn and trying desperately the entire story to do the right thing. And at no point in time is he ever really completely sure what the right thing is. So you very much feel like you're in Joe's shoes here of just kind of going back and forth. And sometimes her claims seem more outlandish, but then also like he seems kind of sketchy. And so you really are constantly kind of bouncing back and forth the entire time. You feel good rooting for Joe though. You feel like Joe, there's every indication that Joe is genuinely just a good guy that's getting wrapped up in some real weird shit. You're just rooting for Joe more than anybody else. And honestly, there's points in the story where you want him to just sort of wipe his hands of the whole thing and just walk away and let these two work it out for themselves. But he doesn't. But you want him to because you're like, well, Joe, don't underestimate how important you are, Joe. I really do think, oh, Mr. Triana, I was not familiar with your game. It's so good. It's so effective. It's so, like, you're just so invested in Joe. I love Joe's character immediately, just his kind of quiet self-reflection at the beginning of the story. I felt very on board with rooting for Joe. And this whole situation, you can just imagine how intense it would feel, especially in a situation like that. That's so high stake. I really enjoyed this. I found this story very satisfying. Oh gosh, I'm running out of time. Okay. Last but certainly not least is I Don't Recognize This World Anymore. This was written this year. I had the exact opposite experience as Gone to See the Riverman. I said when I read Gone to See the Riverman, it took way longer for me to read than it normally would because I kept stopping to analyze the descriptions and the sentences and the way it was written and everything. I did not have that experience with this. This, on the other hand, I flew through this bad boy. This book is almost 400 pages. Yeah, it's like 380 something. I read this in 2 days, and I probably could have read it in 1 day if I had just not had other things to do in my life. This is about a man who gets hired working as a corrections officer in a women's prison, thinking that this is going to be easier than working in a men's prison. However, this specific prison is the one that basically houses all of the worst female offenders. So it's the baddest of the baddie female criminals, the worst of the worst. This is where they are. So there are different wings in the prison. So there's ones that are worse than other ones and all of that. So similar to Toxic Love, Liam is in his 40s. He's divorced and starting over. He quickly realizes how challenging this position can be, trying to keep an air of authority about him in the prison to be respected by the inmates, but also not wanting to be so hard on them that they resent him and intentionally push back against him. You're trying to ride that line. One of the inmates, Zoe, he meets her and he kind of has a little bit of a crush on her. And this sad, lonely man who is working this job largely because there's a dog. His dog is sick and he is trying to save up money to pay for his treatment. After the divorce, he has become very, very attached to his dog. So Charlie the Lab is pretty much the most important thing to him at this point. With him feeling very determined to keep this job, despite the fact that it is very challenging because he needs this money. Zoe, they start to bond. He ends up telling her about his dog. She smells blood in the water and she's like, oh, you need money. I can make sure you get some money. If I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back, that sort of thing. Dangling the carrot of money for his dog, but also her sexuality to manipulate him to do whatever it is she wants him to do. And he falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. He continues to fall deeper and deeper into this well of depravity within this prison. Zoe's playing him like a fiddle. He does not somehow doesn't see how very obviously she is playing him, that she does not care about it. Like, it's very, as the reader, it's very, very obvious she does not care about him, but he's fantasizing about them having a relationship when she gets out and all this stuff. And it's kind of sad to read at points. If you've ever seen Breaking Bad and you like that show, you would probably like this. It's that guy who's like basically a normal guy who, due to extreme circumstances, he kind of takes a step onto the wild side, and then the next thing he knows, he's just trying to see if he can swim in these rough waters. And that's kind of the question. Is he going to learn how to swim or is he going to drown? It is just fantastic. I couldn't put it down. I flew through this book. There's so many little details and he's getting away with things, and so he's very emboldened by that and feels like he can take bigger and bigger risks. And you see that he starts to talk about Charlie, the dog that this was all supposed to be about. Charlie doesn't go away, but he starts to talk about him less and less throughout the story. And it's just a very clear example of this started off as being about the dog, but at some point it stopped being about the dog and becomes more about him and how engaging in this behavior makes him feel. It really gets into, obviously there's commentary in here about the corruption within this sort of system, the prison system, and how instead of being rehabilitated, they are way worse when they leave than they were when they came in, and that doesn't just apply to the prisoners, but that's anybody in this environment is at high risk of very poor mental health. And if you're going in to this system with poor mental health already, that it really capitalizes on that. I thought this story was so interesting. I loved it. It was my second favorite after Gone to See the Riverman. In conclusion, Kristopher Triana he's just a very, very talented writer, particularly in nature settings for me personally, but clearly, again, especially in I Don't Recognize This World Anymore, he does not need to lean on that either. He knows how to plant the seeds of certain things in a way that you don't even realize how in control he is of how you're feeling at any point in time. I enjoyed this so much. It was so exciting. I was getting more and more excited as I continued to go through his books. So yes, I am definitely a converted big fan of Kristopher Triana, and if you have not read him, I would strongly encourage you to check him out. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and maybe I'll see you the next time around. That head doesn't just chew up these women and spit them back out. Like he doesn't spit, he swallows.